with my sky and my ground here, I'm going to just name this layer by double-clicking in the layer and typing in background. So it's now been named. As always, it's a good idea to lock a layer when you're done working with it so that you have that set. Now I'm going to add a new layer here. And this layer, I'm going to draw something on. So I'll choose my paintbrush and use a fatter size. Oh, forgot this morning I changed to a different brush style, so it was behaving oddly. Nah, he doesn't need any arms today. But if I have a character and I want to work with it, it would make sense to, if this is going to be the layer for it, name it. Now, if I want to animate this character, and I do it frame by frame, if I select it and want to move it, I run into the problem that not everything moves. Now, if I'm going to hand draw everything each frame, so I'll hit F7, insert an empty keyframe, redraw using onion skinning or something, that works. And that's something I can do. But if I want to expedite the process a little bit more, I may want to convert this to a symbol. So if I highlight everything, that selects outline, that chooses eyes, mouth. So with everything selected, I can modify, choose convert to symbol. This is not insert new symbol. This is convert to symbol because I already have artwork drawn. That's a key distinction, that some people find that when they try and make a symbol, they keep choosing insert new symbol. And when you do that, it creates a new symbol object. The problem with that is that new symbol object that appears, you have an empty stage and then you have to draw it, and you were trying to convert something you already made to a symbol. And that can be a way to work. You just keep creating new symbols and creating the artwork within that symbol. And we can look at that later tonight. So modify, convert, now convert to bitmap, convert to symbol. So when I do that, now it gives me my convert to symbol information. And we can see I have movie clip, button, and graphic. I'm going to recommend that you leave it at movie clip because we can always kind of reclassify objects as graphics or buttons as we need them, but for now let's just leave them as movie clips. You'll be happier down the road. Can give it a name, and we can see that we can assign the default registration point for the object. The default is always top left corner, but you could certainly choose center if you wanted. That would put the registration mark in the center of the object. It's not a big deal, especially when you're doing timeline animation, because you can adjust the registration point of objects when you put them on screen. So I wouldn't worry too much about that as an option. I typically leave things at the default unless I have a reason to do otherwise. Okay, here it is. So now, there he is, but he's kind of hard to select because he has no fill. So I want to modify him. Now if I look at my library, I'll see there he is. There's my guy. If I double click on that, it brings me to this dialog where I can see that there he is. And I could modify him here. If I look at the top of the screen, it says scene 1, and now it tells me I am inside symbol guide. This is important because when you start adding new layers, when you start adding frames, you have to be aware of whether you're at the main timeline or inside a symbol, because later on today we're going to put timelines inside of other timelines. So we're going to have nested animations today. All right. So I could color things here. So if I go grab my paint bucket, let's have an orange shirt. green skin. Dark red, and we'll worry about the eyes later. So, colored it. Back to scene 1. There it is. Now, if I double click, notice we have blue, brown. If I double click on my symbol, this is called editing in place. So, under the edit menu, if I choose edit in place, it allows me to see the background and possibly other objects that are on stage with this, but now I can edit this single symbol because I decide I don't like his blue pants. So we're going to go for a little lighter color. I think that's better. And if I wanted, I could even give him an arm. So, wanted to switch over to that tool. So, when you're trying to choose the color of something you've already drawn with, if you hit I for the eyedropper, you can choose a color. And then if you hit B, it brings you back to the brush. Then you can paint with it, or after I choose the color with the eyedropper, it immediately does default to the paint bucket, and I can then fill with that as well. So now I have a guy on stage here, and he's ready to animate. Once again, I locked the background layer. Guy is not locked. I want to animate this. I can take advantage of what they introduced in CS4, which is called the motion tween. This is the new motion tween, not the classic motion tween that they used to have. So the new motion tween, right-click on the symbol, right-click in the timeline, and insert motion tween. So it's available in a couple of different places, but you're looking for motion tween. I typically right-click either on the frame or on my artwork as part of this. Create motion tween. It defaults to adding 1 second to my movie. And we can see the background disappeared here. So the background is gone. Now that I've extended the background through judicious use of F5, I want to animate my character. If I put my playback head, the frame I'm trying to affect, I can move my character across the stage. And we will see that what has appeared is a series of dots along a line. Those dots represent individual frames. So if I were to count the dots, I would see there are 24. It's an unfortunate color with the color of his shirt, so I'm going to change the color of his shirt so that we can better see those dots. Oh, I chose the background color. That was unfortunate as well. Let's try again. All right. So now I can see the dots that are here. So this line, I can even select it, I can move it. And that moves the entire animation. This line is representing the tween. This is the animation path that my character is following. And wow, his pants are now an unfortunate color is the same as the sky. So I'm having some bad color decision making tonight apparently. So let's try to choose something different. It's not the most attractive color combinations I've worked with before, but it'll do. Now if I look at this path that I have here, we can see that this represents the animation. Each dot is 1 frame of animation, so I could count that and get 24 dots. This path is modifiable. As you've seen, I've moved the path, which moves both the starting and ending point. But if I put my cursor and click off it so it's not highlighted and put my cursor near it, actually let's highlight it and move it, it'll show better up here. When I put my cursor near it, there's a small cursor change There we go. The cursor changes and it gets a small line next to it. And that line indicates that it's going to modify this path the same as if it were a path or straight line that I had drawn myself. So if I click, I can pull and we can see that it's changing the shape of that path. And now my character is going to follow a curved shape. For those of you who like Illustrator, I can click with my sub-selection tool and click on one of the handles of that line. And I can adjust its curvature the same as if it was a Bezier path that I had drawn by hand in Illustrator. So if you like that control, if you like working with it that way, you have that kind of flexibility. I can now take my character and I can move it, further adjusting the path at that point. If I look closely, I will see that in the timeline, it's now inserted a keyframe for me, but this type of keyframe, a motion tween keyframe, instead looks different. It's a diamond instead of a circle. So we see this diamond shape for a motion tween keyframe. So instead of being the round circle, it's now a diamond. That indicates that is a keyframe in this motion tween. So we can see this happening. Now, I'm only changing position here, but when I have a motion tween like this, there's nothing to say that I can't change other properties of my object. I can now take my object, hold down Shift and keep it proportional, so I can now scale it down. I can make an object bigger. So you can create a lot of movement very quickly using these keyframes in the animation. If I want this motion tween to take longer, because if I play my movie, we can see, okay, it's approximately 1 second long, slightly longer in its playback because it was thinking a little bit there. But if I test my movie, we can see it goes fairly quick. But if I want him to move slower, if I go to my motion tween, I can just drag it out. And now instead of 24 dots, there are now 90 dots occurring here. So if I play this, you can see it's a much slower animation. It's approximately a 4-second animation instead of a 1-second animation. My background disappears after 1 second because it only has been given 1 second worth of frames. So if I want to add more frames in, I can just click out there, hit F5. Now we can see I have the frames. So it's an easy way to start getting things to appear. So a question has come up, how can I change the speed of the animation along this path? The first thing I want to do is I want to tweak my path a little bit so that it's easier to see the differences and changes. And to do that, I'm going to just remove the tween and then re-add it because I want to start over with it. I also want you to notice that the icon for the layer changes. You get this little box with kind of trails of small boxes behind it on a tweened layer, while on a normal background layer you can see it looks more like a page icon. So tween layers do have a different appearance. One of the important things while you're working in this program is to pay attention to these small details. It takes a while to get used to knowing where to look, training your eyes where to look, but also to pay attention to those small details. Does it say scene 1, or does it say scene 1 and then the name of the object that you're working on? If you're trying to be in scene 1, but you see the name of the object, you're going to be having issues if you start adding in additional layers of content, frames, and things that you don't intend to because you were trying to put those on scene 1. So you have to pay attention to the details when you are working in Flash. Okay, so I've added the tween back. Also notice tween layers get this nice light cyan color instead of the gray color. That's a further indication that this is not just a standard layer, but it is different. So if I want to now animate this and move said guy across the stage, moves across the stage here. Just going to go to the end. Pull it down. I'm going to make sure he's not completely running off screen here. So that I have room to move them. Now, when we look at the animation occurring here, we can see it's moving across this arc. If I were to take and make him bigger at this point, smaller at this point, you can see. So we can now adjust that. He's moving kind of at the same rate, end to end, because that's about in the middle. If I hold down the Command key, I can click on an individual keyframe. So once again, if I want to select this, so when the whole thing is selected, if I do that, it moves the whole tween block, and we'll look at doing more with that later. But if I click on just the Command key, it selects just that frame. I can move that keyframe over. So we can see now that's adjusting that property of you went small to big. It takes much longer to get down. Now, if I want to adjust the curvature of this path, I could change its shape so it creates the illusion of coming forward quickly and then going slower. The key thing is the animation to make it faster or slower is how many frames do you give it to do that transformation. Fewer frames makes it faster. More frames makes it slower. With my text written, this is one of the cool things that I can do with Flash. Now, my text is here, and we can see it's on top of my character. That's fine. Background is here if I want to see it. So I'm just going to turn off my character. I'm going to lock that layer momentarily. Now, with this text, if I want to animate it, back in the day, what it required us to do is to make an individual text field for each letter by hand. So I'd grab the text tool, I would click make a letter, click off it, click to make a new text field, type in my next letter, and go. So for a whole sentence of text, it really sucked. But now what Flash allows me to do is I can type in some text, and I can go under the Modify menu and choose Break Apart. And this will then separate the text into individual fields of text. Now, one thing about dealing with text, when you're putting text in your project for title sequences, animations, and things like that, the font needs to be on the computer when you are creating your finished project, because otherwise it won't publish with it. It needs that font information. So you have two options available to you. Keep it with install the font, then open up your project. Otherwise, we can further break the text down so it no longer requires the font information. So if you get a really cool title font that you have on your home machine and want to use that in your project, I could take this one step further and I could break it down again, and now it's rendered this text not as individual text fields, but just as shapes, as if I hand painted that with the paintbrush or something. Disadvantage is now if I want to animate these, I have to individually convert each one of these to a symbol, and that's really kind of annoying. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to leave these like this. Now, with these like this, what's really kind of fun in Flash is I can then right-click, and there's this cool option called Distribute to Layers, where it will take these objects that are all on one layer. Say I have this layer 4, they're all there, and it will distribute each one to its own layer. Now, as I look here, I've put each letter on its own layer. A very important thing is when you are animating, if an object is going to animate or move, it's not going to be a static background image or a static foreground image, tree, bush, building, but if you're going to move it around on screen and it's going to have keyframes and things, it must be on its own layer, one object per layer for animation. So if your project is going to have 100 different objects all moving, you're going to have at least 100 different layers. And that's okay. That's completely okay. Now, some of you may find that as you start working and you get lots of layers that you would prefer that you could organize things a little bit more. And for those neat freaks who like things organized, what we have available to us in Flash is a folder. So I can add a folder. And then this folder, I'm going to name it Text Sequence. And then I can take all of these layers that I've created and I can drag them into that folder so they're now part of that. So that now hides them, but when I need them, I can see them again. So that's and I don't need that layer anymore, so I can get rid of that. So now I have my text sequence occurring in this folder. Because these are text fields, Flash does give us a cool option that I can select all these layers, and then I can right-click. Actually, I should be able to. All right, so under Insert, choose Motion Tween versus trying to right-click. The right-click only does the layer I clicked on. So I highlighted all these layers, and then I was able to convert them. So I've now created a whole bunch of motion tweens. And if we look at this, nothing's happening yet. But if I take each one of these letters, so this is my awesome exploding text. And I should hear lots of oohs and ahs because you should be suitably impressed with this as an animated effect of, oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And now if we play this, we can see that. Ooh, okay, now you're just humoring me because that looks like crap. And I understand that because that's okay. But it's fixable. Because now that we know we can do that, let's see if I'm able to bring all of these in. Okay. All right. So I'm going to just shorten these up because as we saw, taking 4 seconds to animate this just really wasn't very exciting. And before I added in there or finished, before I moved them, it would have been better if I had shortened them all to begin with. So I'm going to make them all 1 second long for now. But what would be really cool is if they didn't all start and finish at the same time. So if I stagger their animations. So currently now we can see, let's see, as 1 second. Okay, that's a little better. At 1 second, it's a little snappier. If I want this to go faster or staggered, I have a few options available. Hold down Command, click on the keyframe. Hold down Option to make a copy of it. I can now drag, whoop, I don't want to do that because it disappears. And we can see that it's telling me it's going to do it because it puts the little plus next to my cursor, so it indicates it's making a copy. Command to select, Option drag to copy that keyframe. Command to select, well, Option drag to copy the keyframe. Command to select, Option drag to copy the keyframe. Oh well, fine, those can stay. Now if we watch, it just works its way across during the explosion, creating my most awesome. Now this is more worthy of the oohs and ahs that you issued at prompting. So they weren't genuine. My feelings are hurt, but it's a crappy text effect anyway, so I get the effect. But it's kind of fun, especially if you scrub it at extra fast speed. Now the nice part that I can work with here. Now if we look at this, you'll notice that I'm going to just go for the M here, that when I pull this back, if I pull that to here, we'll see that the keyframe stays in the middle. Now if I look at this one where the keyframe is closer to the end and shorten it to that same distance, the keyframe stays closer to the end. So Flash has a proportional spacing of the keyframes. So if I make this longer, it's proportionally spacing out those keyframes. If I make it shorter, it's proportionally spacing those keyframes. Typically when you're doing text effects, unless you want it to be real soft and gentle, you normally are going to make them go fairly quick. Otherwise, it just seems to be like a bad PowerPoint transition. So now we can see it goes quick. And there's nothing in the timeline after these, so they disappear. If I want my character to start later, say after that, I could just drag it out. So now the character isn't there, my guy isn't there until after the text. Awesome. And then he comes up on screen with his missing arm. Maybe he's going to need to wave to us a little bit later. We'll figure that out shortly. I can turn on the background. I can see, and I take effect, test my movie. Ooh. I've now created a layer. It has 5 of my guy characters on it, and I'm going to do something with it. The first thing I'm going to do is not right click there, but I'll right click on the characters and I will choose distribute to layers. When I do that, it puts each one onto its own layer. And lesson learned from last time of we don't want extra frames, so I can shift F5, get rid of those frames, so now it's shorter. Okay, apparently, let me try again. There we go. Shift F5, frames went away. So if all of these guys are here, and now select those layers, modify, or no, insert, motion tween. They're now all tween layers. We can see their icon changed. And I'll lock my text sequence, so now I can easily. So if I wanted them all to drop down, they all move, and we can see that they've all been tweened. So I can do that in one fell swoop. They all now moved. Now if I wanted each one of those to stagger, I could grab that tween and it could be kind of fun. Keep having new ones appear. It's actually kind of fun. It's a fun little animation. I'll turn off the other layer so we can just watch. It's like raining something. Now he's going pretty quick because each animation is about half a second in length, not even. If I want to overlap those, I can adjust their timing. I could make it appear a little bit more random. So as you play with the animation, there's different things that you can do. Now, within an animation here, if I look at this, I want to transform it. We can see that I can transform it, and it's moving around its registration point that it's assigned to this movie clip, which is the white circle. Free transform tool, third tool down in the tool palette. 1, 2, 3. It's transforming around his middle. If I take that registration point and put it up to his head, you can see he's now rotating around his head. Which is actually kind of fun. It's fun to rotate around the head versus rotating in the middle. We can contrast that to this one, which would rotate around its middle. So we're going to see a different quality in the animation. So you can see how it's flinging around from that point. But who said the registration point has to be on the artwork? So I can flip it. I move the registration point way up so we can see that in the process of doing that. So just by changing the registration point, we're changing the quality, the visual quality of the animation. So there's a number of different things going on here. I'm going to just shorten this sequence here because I know I don't want it to take that full effect. I'm going to turn these layers off, lock all these layers. Always lock your layers when you're not using them. Always, 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 so you don't add artwork to the wrong layer. So I have one layer per item. So you can see there's my background. Now, it's nighttime. It's dark outside, or almost dark outside now. So I am going to create a moon. It's a full moon. So if I turn on my background, we can see there's the moon. If I select that artwork, convert it to a symbol, call it the moon. Here's my moon. Create a motion tween. Opening frame, we'll put it over here. Oh no, we'll put it on the other side so it goes opposite direction of the guy. And at the end, apparently we'll need to extend out the background. And at the end, move it across the sky. Pull that a little bit so we can see the moon is moving quite nicely. So now I have the moon moving across the stage. It's a single timeline, but I'm going to have a little bit of fun and I'm going to add some extra stuff around the moon because I can. And this is where it's going to get interesting. So if I want to edit the moon, if I double click on the moon, here's the moon. And I am going to draw something that I'm going to have appearing to animate around the moon. We're going to create the illusion of something following a path, and it'll flow and then disappear. So it creates the illusion of moving around the moon. Well, then the moon would need to be stationary, and then I could have the cow jumping over. The cow is going to be flying around the moon. That's it. I'm going to make a cow. The cow is going to fly around the moon. Maybe even the cow will animate. We'll see. I haven't drawn a cow for a while, so forgive me if my cow stinks. I'm just, that's my excuse for being lazy and potentially doing a bad job. All right, so let's see. So we have a cow needs to be way big. I'm drawing more almost a horse there. I know, because I don't draw cows very often. I draw more horses than cows. I'm trying to think. What makes it more cow-like? So then it's just once you start doing the dots. The colors, but then it could look like a palomino. So it's really.
Why is its tail like that?
Yeah, because tail's off. Let's see. There's my eraser. Well, I don't like that tail. And all right. And for this, I do have to then fill it with the rest of it with color, otherwise the sky will show through. The current setting on my paint bucket, it was set close large gaps. I'm going to say don't close gaps, so it then fills it up a little bit quicker and nicer. All right, not my best work, but we'll call it a cow for now. So highlight it, F8, cow. Now there's a cow ready to fly around the moon. Now we can see that the scale of the cow is a little bit off here at the moment. So I'm going to use free transform, which you can get to by hitting Q on the keyboard. As you do learn some of the keystrokes, you'll find that it does expedite the working progress to make it a little bit faster. So we need the cow here, but the cow really is going to need to be on its own layer for animation purposes. So I will put the cow on its own layer. Now, if I want to animate said cow, right click, create motion tween, we can see that our moon dropped away. I'm going to lock the moon layer. Here's my cow. I think the cow is going to be locked in a fixed orbit because it doesn't have 3 dimensions, and I'm not interested in animating that type of effect right now of trying to show it flipping, because we can do a basic flip as we work our way across on the animation, but it runs into a problem that we'll notice that our cow is paper thin, and it will be completely thin and flat during that flip process, so we're not going to quite go there. So if I'll start with the cow right here, animate out. Animate over. So I've run out of room on my animation. Oh darn. The good part is if I want to add more, I can just click out in the timeline anywhere and hit F6. It adds in more. And see, I still need my moon. F5. Now I can see my cow is... Now there's a slight problem occurring here in that during this animation we can see that, well, it's like the cow is kind of doing a loop all the way in front of the moon, so it's not really orbiting it, and we will look at what you could do to fix that. If I go back to my selection arrow, not transform, I can take this path here and start to round it out a little bit so it follows a little nicer curvature, so it doesn't seem so... So now it starts to follow a little more kind of an elliptical orbit. So you can see now the cow is following that nice elliptical orbit. Recording going on. So I've now added a new layer. Paste in place. Command-Shift-V. Now we can see the moon. So it'd be right here. We need the moon to be done. So the cow came out from, and then we will need it to not exist until, might have to tweak that just a little bit and make it stick out further so his nose doesn't get cut off, but that's easy to fix. So it's right here. If I hit F7, goes away. So it's now created that illusion. Cow went in front of the moon. And now we need another copy of the moon to appear, but I think I need to modify the cow's position here a little bit, so then there's enough room to make it disappear. So bring the moon back right here. So if I say F7, empty keyframe, paste in place, moon came back, and the cow loops. And I'm very appreciative for the idea of putting a cow into the mix tonight. I think this is a lot of fun, because I've never done a cow orbiting the moon before. So I'm going to save. Back to scene 1. Now if I watch my moon here, what I will see is no cow. No cow. But if I test my movie, I'll see the cow is orbiting the moon, which I'm really digging that. I'm excited about this. This is kind of fun. Now, I think I need to modify the cow a little bit so that when it goes in front of the moon, it's bigger, and when it's moving towards the back, it's shrinking in size a little bit just to further the illusion. And that's easy enough to do. If I double-click, get back into this, get to the cow here, free transform. 3 tools down is free transform. Hold down Shift as I drag so it gets a little bigger. Smaller. Let it stay. Now at this point, shrink it back down. And as it further goes behind, shrink a little bit more. And take the initial so now we have some size changing going on with it. The key thing to remember here It looks like the cow is going behind the moon, but when I look at my layers, we can see we're creating an illusion. Animation is about creating an illusion of something, so the finished result looks to be a certain way. Now I am going to shrink this, move this animation over so we get to watch the cow more. It's just fun. So it creates the illusion of that animation. That's really what it is. It's nothing more than creating the illusion. Now, if I play my movie here, we see that there is no cow. When I have a nested animation, we run into a problem of we can't see it play when that object is a movie clip. It's a movie clip, and I told you make movie clips. Under Properties, we can see this object is a movie clip, and it's an instance of my moon. But I can tell Flash that if I want to or need to see this play, I can say treat it as a graphic. This is important. If I treat it as a graphic, now I get to see that animation occur here. If I look at this, I have position, size, X, Y, width, height, color effects. Looping, we'll worry about that later. If I am a movie clip, position, X, Y, width, height, X, Y, Z, width, height. So I actually have a 3D property and my color effect. And I even have filters that I can apply to it. So if I want to take this moon and say I want to put a glow on it, and I want my glow to be, I'll choose a nice pink color, make it bigger, okay, turn off the background. You can see it's glowing. Now that glow fades up and stays because this filter is completely tweenable. So if I want the glow to go away at the end, now we can see, so I could put a glow on this symbol. But if I say treat this as a graphic, it tells me, no, you can't have any glows on it then. And the glow goes away. I get to see the cow. So when you are building your animation, my advice is make everything a movie clip. If you need to be able to scrub the timeline to see where it is for animation purposes, you temporarily convert the object to a graphic symbol. And if you want to apply movie clip effects or filters and things like that to it later, then you convert it back to a movie clip and apply those effects. Because maybe you want to affect the whole thing here as, say, with a blur, which is always fun. So I could take this and blur out my moon. Now we don't get to watch the cow here, but now we can see that there's a blurred cow moving around my blurred moon. It's kind of sad now that I've lost my cow, so I don't think I would keep that effect in this instance. But depending on what you're doing, that is something to take into account. So I don't like the blur on this one. I'll turn that off. So when they're movie clips, they have more options available to them. When they are symbols or graphic symbols, they have fewer options, but you get to watch their timeline play. So we can see that cow. For animating characters and syncing their moving parts, that's important. To make a walking version, my advice is take this symbol that I've created of my guy, my character. And if you right-click on it, there's an option to duplicate. I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to call this guy walking. can double click on guy walking. Here he is. So here's my guy. First thing I want to do is I want to get his legs onto separate layers. To do that, the easiest way really is to cut them from his body using the lasso tool. So I'm making a selection there. And I am going to convert that to a symbol. That's his right leg. Use the lasso tool. Leg left. So now I have two legs. And I can select everything, hold down Shift, deselect the legs. And in a more complex animation, I would convert every body part to its own symbol. His foot, his leg, his arm, his hand, his torso, his head. Everything gets to be its own part so I can animate the entirety of the character. But now the remaining artwork here, his body, this will be body. Now with everything selected, I can say distribute to layers. So they're all on their own layer. Now with this, I want to animate a leg or two. First off, it's going to be hard for him to walk with both feet pointing out, duck style, facing forward, and I'm going to make him walk sideways. So I'm going to cheat first, and I'm going to say modify, transform, flip horizontal. So we can see, all right, now his legs moved and flipped. Second, what I'm going to do when I go to animate this, I'm going to need to modify it because it shouldn't pivot at the middle of his foot. Just like when I was spinning the guys falling from when it was raining men, I need to now modify this by grabbing with the free transform tool, move my registration point up into the hip area. So now he's moving behind his body. Select the other leg. Move that registration point. So we got a little problem going here, that I need more leg. Because if we look here, we can see I'm kind of short leg. I think I want to pull this back a little bit too. Let's see. Yeah, I like that better. But I need more leg. So to do that, I can double click on his leg. Notice it's scene 1, guy walking, leg left. Now we need to add a little bit more leg here. To do that, I can grab my eyedropper tool, click on red, grab my paintbrush, extend the leg out. Extend the leg out, and grab my eyedropper tool, click on green, paint it in. Now, if I go back one level to guy walking, you can see now I have more leg. Could probably go clean up his body a little bit. So in a more polished animation, I would go into his body and grab the eraser and just clean it up a little bit. So it looks a little cleaner and neater. Okay. Legs need to switch because this leg is really, should be in front of that one. So from here, we have one leg forward, one leg back. If I want to animate these, this is where onion skinning can be useful. And I can do simple keyframes. Tweening in this instance is not always going to be the best result, but it may work. So I will try to use tweening. So I'll say create motion tween, create motion tween. And the body is going to just stay put for now. I could motion tween the body, but for now we'll just leave it. Okay. So if we see we're here, after a couple frames, this foot comes back, this foot goes to here, a couple more frames. Because I adjusted the registration point, we're able to make the, oh, and now that front leg is a little bit too short too, but I can take care of that a little bit later. Okay. So I don't need that many frames. Get rid of them. It'd be nice if his left leg, the foot, was at a slightly different angle, but for the purposes of this, now he has moving legs. He's walking. Oh, it's there. Now let's watch it go. It seemed like it was jumping. That's a little smoother. So now he's walking. His body should probably bounce up and down a little bit with the walking to make it a little more natural. And there's so many things you can do if you try and develop doing walk cycles, that if you decide that this part of it, of trying to make things move and animate, is becoming fun for you, there are tons of resources online for doing walk cycles. If you just Google animation walk cycle, you'll find a gazillion tutorials on how to pull off that type of thing. All right, so now cow jumped over the moon. He is here. You can see that character as he moves across the stage. He should really be walking. So what I can do is I can now select the character here once I unlock his layer. I can go under Properties, and currently it says this is Guy, which we know it's the guy standing there. If I go under Swap, if I hit Guy Walking and say OK, we can see it changed. And if once again, if I click on it and use that, treat it as a graphic, we can see he's walking his way. It's more kind of like walking on Ballet Point or something obnoxious like that, but he's walking. If I want it to take longer so we can actually see it, he's now working his way across the stage. So while you build your project, sometimes it's worthwhile to use proxy artwork. You build in just a stationary object, placeholder. Then you build the animated piece that you use during the animation cycles. But now, if I have need for him to be standing somewhere at a given frame, I can do that. So I can add a version of him. So I can add a version of him at the very end. So if this animation is one frame shorter, this very end, now I can have a version of him at the very end. And if I took the time, I could line up onion skinning. Oh wow, he's way up there. we'll put him back down to Earth. So after that, he stays. We'll let that stay for a few seconds, or a few frames. We've got to have the moon going on still. So he works his way across, and then parks there for almost a second.